imagine a family who don't want to get in trouble and having to make the hard choice of getting rid of their child. That's in itself is traumatic.
Everybody, welcome back to our podcast. We're so happy to have you here. Just a couple of disclaimers. Our channel is not anti-adoption. We are anti-education so that you can do adoption right. And also, if you
Hmm.
have a story and you want to share your story as an adoptee, we'd love to have you on our podcast and feature you for our audience to hear what you have to say about your experience. You can email us at adoptedgals@gmail.com.
Yes, and don't be afraid to, don't be shy, email us. Today's topic is something that we felt like needed to be talked about. It's about the ban in China. China recently came out banning adoption, and that is big news because China is one of those countries that is a huge commodity for adoption. Like there, I feel
Mhm.
like there are more Asian children that are adopted into white families than Black children, but we thought we needed to talk about that and see what the reason was.
Yes, exactly. So, as of beginning of it was August 29th, I believe was the official date.
Mm,
China announced a ban on international adoption. So they're still doing domestic adoption, but just international. There's been a ban, and this has really created a huge shift in adoption policy because, like Fatma just said, China was one of those countries that was, um, so many kids were being adopted left and right from that country. So this is a big deal for the adoption industry. Um, so China's foreign ministry announced it was, I believe, like Thursday, August 28th, essentially, that no more Chinese children will be sent abroad for adoption. The only exceptions will be for foreigners adopting the children of or stepchildren of blood relatives in China. So
mm.
that is, I love that. I love that. I don't know about you, Famata, but I love that because these people are blood related. They're it's not like they're going to be adopted into some into a white family or someone that is not the same culture. They're really just being adopted within their family. And it
Hmm.
kind of brings the point. Somebody on one of our other videos um, mentioned that there was some adoptee advocate that was saying how maybe the best way to go about adoption is to not have any transracial adoption, but only be able to
Mm.
adopt if it's within the same family. And I think that's a
Hmm.
beautiful idea.
That is definitely a beautiful idea. Um, and also at the same time, mute on your end.
What was that?
Mute on your end because I can hear me echoing. Try muting. Um, yeah, I'm honestly, I'd rather, when it comes to adoption, I'd rather have that where it's family members that are actually adopting children within their own family, which is great. And I think a lot of times when it comes to just adoption in general, like there's this other story that we're gonna do after this. They give family a hard time when it comes to adopting because adoption is a commodity. It makes a lot of money. It's like I don't I almost said franchise, not franchise, but it makes a lot of money. But yeah, but at the same time, I do wonder though for like the children that don't have families. So what are they going to do about that? That's a good question. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that? What do you think they're going to do about that?
Well, to be honest with you, so that is something that I did some research on, and that definitely is a big problem. The way that it impacts the current orphans. So the ban directly affects thousands of orphans currently who remain in these institutions, limiting their chances to find permanent homes. But I want to give a little bit of backstory on that situation. So in like since 1992, more than 160,000 Chinese children have been adopted into families all over the world, overseas, but predominantly to America. About half of these children have been adopted to the United States. So that's a big deal. Those are huge numbers.
Yeah.
And sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing. Yeah, because China started their adoption policy because of the one child rule, right? So they had to figure out how to do that. But I think you're gonna get into like why, right? They're doing that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. No, I'm going to. So, like Fatmata was alluding to, there was the one child policy, but then the Chinese started to have a big problem, which was their population growth was really sinking down, right? Um, so because of that, in 2020, during the pandemic, China suspended international adoptions. One, to ensure the health and safety of the children, because during COVID there was a lot of violence against Chinese people, so they just kind of put a suspension to international adoption. Just imagine what could happen to these Chinese babies if they were adopted into like racist homes and whatnot, right? And also, because of the decline in population, China slowly over the years, I believe it was in like 2015, they kind of lifted off the restriction of only being able to have one child, and they allowed for two children. But still, even with that new policy, they still weren't seeing the growth that they were expecting. And then I think then finally allowed, I forget the year, but they allowed three children for every single household for married households. But even then, that wasn't enough, right? And partly that is just because, one, like the rise of cost is just insane nowadays. And so I think people were able to see the benefit of just having one child. They're like, oh, wait a minute, like I don't have to have more children. I have one, which is a son. At that point, a lot of the children that were being adopted off were baby girls and boys with disabilities. So now
Mm,
these families, they have one boy who they can put into school and they can go into business or whatever. So they saw the benefit of having one child.
so
And so it kind of was like it kind of bit them in the butt in a way.
yeah. I mean, initially I understood why they were doing it because the population was just out of hand. And of course, that is going to catch up to you eventually, especially now, like you said. Yeah, you can have more kids, but it's like in this economy and inflation and how the world is and how just countries, I don't know how China is when it comes to supporting families and children and how that is, because I know in the States it's absolutely horrible. And there's also decline in like the population. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say decline on that. I would have to fact check, but a lot of people are not wanting to have children because yeah, I mean it's hard to when it's so expensive. The cost of living is rising, and then you're not making things better for people to actually want to have children. But it's unfortunate definitely for those who like the children who actually don't have any family members, but I think this is also a good thing in a way. It's going to force families to like keep their children instead of like giving them up for adoption and making it that it's not going to be as easy for them.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And get this. So um, the decline of adoption, international adoption, has actually been a gradual process. It just got
mhm,
finalized in August, this
yep.
year. But after COVID, I think COVID was what kind of made them rethink, like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to depend on
Mhm.
America. You know what I mean? America is already treating us like shit, anyways, after this COVID situation. So then
That was awful.
um, yeah, so in 2021, so no Chinese children were sent to the US for adoption in 2021 or 2022. Last year, which I believe they're referring to 2023, only 16 children were adopted from China, according to the US State Department. Yeah. Could we get that for Africa?
That
Like,
is insane.
yes. So we went
Well,
from like
I-
over the years since 1972, 160,000 to just in 1 year, like in one over one
and
year, just 16. That's
and
insane.
they went through hoops.
Yes,
Them
girl.
kids on
Yes,
hoops.
girl. But this tells me the Chinese people do not play about their people
Yeah.
at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're willing to do and to do what they need to do to
Yeah.
protect I wouldn't say protect their people because the one child policy, I don't know about that, but they're willing to do what they need to do to protect their country overall, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, so yeah, so this ban, like we said, is a huge, huge deal. And, I think this is going to help with increasing the population in
Hmm.
China because when you think about it, yeah, okay, you're thinking maybe 160,000. That's not a lot compared to how many people are in China. But when you
Hmm.
think about it, 160,000 could be 160,000 kids that can have uh,
Hmm.
people that can have kids, right? And
Hmm.
more kids, right?
Yeah.
And so now, the Chinese country, the China is basically skipping out on that
Hmm.
opportunity to have generations of children because they were all
Hmm.
adopted overseas.
Right.
Um,
That is so true. That is definitely very much true. In a way, like I said before, I am for this because what it's telling me is that China is going to put in hopefully some kind of system to help the children that cannot be adopted, that don't have families. So that's telling me that they're going to take accountability in trying to help those children in country, which is honestly to me is more ideal. I wish Sierra Leone and other countries in Africa would do the same and take accountability for children that are given up, that don't have families, figure out how to help those children out. Because at the end of the day, I feel like it's better for a child to get all the resources that they need and be around their country. I mean, if even if it's like a family friend that's able to take care of that child and or other family members, you know what I mean? Because I feel like it's a rare case for a child to not have like nobody. You know what I mean? There's got to be at least somebody.
exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
it's yeah. But I don't know. I don't know how Africa would do with that because they're a
Girl,
little
like
corrupt over there.
God's hands and God's grace.
Yeah,
But
because
so one thing I wanted to put out there is that you were referring to, okay, so now that they have this policy where they've banned interracial trans not transracial but international adoption,
hmm.
what is China going to do? And so I think over the years, China has actually invested more into like orphans and domestic adoption. So they've invested more money into like resources for families who are adopting, for orphanages, because the problem that happened, the reason why there was so much, what do you call it, so much like international adoption is not just because of the one child policy directly. It's actually
Hmm.
because after the one child policy was then what happened is a lot of the parents, they
Hmm.
started to freak out and they didn't want to break the law, and so they ended up like taking their children and just abandoning their children on like doorsteps of
Oh,
orphanages
wow.
and exactly, so just random places. So
Okay.
now these orphanages and these the government just saw like found a lot of random children just like
Yeah.
middle of nowhere on doorsteps, and so they had to figure out what to do with these children, and they didn't even have enough space in the orphanages. And it just all happened at such a fast rate that I think international adoption was the best outcome. But as I was reading some resources and some like journals and New York Post, New York Times Post, I saw that a few people were saying that like international adoption is actually a very shameful thing for a lot of Chinese people. It's a
Mm.
shameful truth just to say that like we don't have the resources and we have to
Yeah.
depend on another country because Chinese people are very, they're prideful. They've
Yeah.
gone through a lot, and they're a very powerful group of people, and so it's a very shameful act to
Hmm.
know that they have to abandon and get rid of all these children and rely on another country to take care of them, and another
Yeah.
country that is not so kind to them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I really thought it was just the one child policy. But in a way, yes, because people got scared and dumped the kids. But I didn't know that that was what was happening rapidly and just abandoning kids left and right. Wow, that's very, very traumatic for those kids and the families, of course. And because I can't imagine a mother, a family who don't want to get in trouble and having to make the hard choice of getting rid of their child. That's in itself is traumatic because it's not like they wanted to. You know what I mean? They were forced to. So yeah, in a way, I think overall this is not necessarily a bad thing, but I can't wait to see what they do with those children that are orphans that do need adoption that don't really have anyone. So we're definitely gonna have to keep an eye on this to see how they change that and
Yeah.
help orphans.
Yeah, no, it's very true. You're right. I think it's going to be a process, but
Hmm.
I'm glad that they're starting this process because it's kind of like um, it kind of demands the government to figure out what to do to have solutions for themselves instead of just depending on another country. If Africa were to do this, I mean, I'm not going to say Africa because people hate it when we use the blanket of
Hmm.
Africa, because one country that has done this is Ethiopia. I believe
Oh,
they have
really?
completely banned, adoption, like, international adoption. I have to look at the numbers and fact check, but they're aggressively, like, declining
Hmm.
the ability to do international adoption, and, let's just kind of personalize it. If our country, Sierra Leone, were to do this, like, that would just really force the country to come up with solutions. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't think we're there. We're obviously not there yet, but I hope
Hmm.
that is going to be our destination where we can find solutions and resources for our own people, so that we don't have to depend on another country to feed our
Yeah,
kids and to house our kids. And but yeah,
yeah.
on the parent side, the people who are waiting for
Mm.
kids from China,
Wow.
right? I mean, I know they're very disappointed because
Hmm.
they were expecting to bring home a beautiful Chinese baby or children, and
Hmm.
that's just not going to be the case anymore. So
Yeah,
they'll have to
yeah.
find other options, and there's plenty of American kids that need to get adopted. So I think they'll be all right at
Yeah,
the end of the day.
yeah, I do feel for them too, of course, because they've been invested and adoption is not cheap.
It's a long
So
process.
all
Yeah.
that money, I don't know if they're I don't want to say reimbursed. It sounds so like, you know what I mean? I yeah, that's got to be so hard for them because investing time, money, excitement, and some people I'm assuming you're going to have a house set up and yes, adoption, being with your people is great. And at the same time, I can really empathize with them because that's got to be heartbreaking as well. Very much heartbreaking. But is there anything else that we want to add to this?
I would just say, just to kind of sum it all up, that there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, um, and that I guess it kind of inspires me to know that there is like hope in a way for really big change because this happened so
Mm,
quick in such a short period of time. I
hmm.
know that there's been work behind the scenes, but still, like,
Hmm.
for the fact that, like, in 2022 or three, there was only 16 adoption, that's insane, from China. And so it just, I guess, gives me some hope and inspires me to feel like, okay, well, you know, us together as a collective can make an impact, in Africa as well. And I see that adoption has become a bigger topic on social media platforms, and
Hmm.
we're seeing all the darkness of adoption, um, both like politically and also just like morally. There's a lot
Hmm.
of like darkness in this industry, um, and so I definitely hope that there's a future for our people as well.
Yeah, that's honestly well said. I don't really have anything else to add. You said that
Yes.
perfectly. Thank you guys again for joining us on another episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and leave a comment. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Until next time.
Bye, guys.